Welcome back to Kid Time at Golden Prairie Community Church, where we're learning all sorts of things about God. Last time, we learned that God is sovereign, which means He's in charge of everything. Today, we're going to learn that God is just. Now, just in this term is a word that we don't use very much. It's not like I'm just going to the store. No. It is part of the word justice. We use the word justice more. You go to a court and you expect the judge to give justice. You want him to make a right decision as to whether somebody's innocent or guilty. That's what it means. Being just means being right, making the right, correct decision. So that's what just means. And God is always, always, always just. He's always right in His decisions. So we left last time asking, is Adam and Eve going to eat from this tree that God said don't eat from? You see, God called this the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve didn't know anything about evil. They didn't know anything about anything bad. God made everything perfect. They lived in this beautiful garden with anything they could ever want. They never stubbed their toes. They never had a thorn or a thistle get a prickle in them, because there wasn't things like that. Everything was absolutely perfect. So all they knew was good. But by giving them the option, the choice of whether they were going to eat from this tree, God gave them the choice to follow Him or disobey Him. Besides the world and everything else in it, God had also made a whole lot of other types of beings, spiritual beings that we call angels. And He also gave them the choice. One of those beings was called Lucifer. He was maybe even the highest, the most beautiful, the most powerful of all the angels. And God gave him a choice to follow Him or do something else. And Lucifer eventually said, how come He's in charge of me? I don't want Him in charge of me anymore. I think I'm as good as God is. Matter of fact, I think I might be better. I want to be in charge of me. I don't want God in charge of me anymore. And so he talked a bunch of the angels into rebelling against God. And God did the right thing, the just thing, in response to what Satan had done. Lucifer, we now also know as Satan. And he said, you can't be in heaven anymore. And he kicked him out. He said, you can't be in my beautiful place where I live. He said, you got to go. So Adam and Eve were living on earth and living in the garden, and it was all beautiful. But Satan didn't like the fact that they were happy with God being in charge. He wanted them to do something against God and maybe even follow Him. So one day, when they were walking through past this tree of knowledge of good and evil, He came to them in the form of a snake and talked to them and said to Eve, did God say you're going to die if you eat out of that tree? And she said, yeah. He said, we're going to die. And Satan lied to her. He said, you're not going to die. As a matter of fact, you know what's going to happen? You're going to know good and evil. You're going to be just like God Himself. That's what's going to happen, and He just doesn't want you to have that. So why don't you eat something? And he tricked Eve. Eve looked at the tree and said, that looks really good. And so she went and she looked at it and she ate some fruit. Now, we don't know what kind of fruit it is. People talk about it being an apple, but it might have been an orange or a banana or even a kumquat. I don't know what a kumquat is, but it might have been a kumquat. But whatever it was nice and it was good, and she ate some. And then she said to Adam, hey, why don't you have some? It's good. Adam wasn't tricked. Adam knew what he was doing. He knew he was disobeying God. But he ate anyway. And they didn't die right away. The actual word isn't just die, it's dying you will die, which means that you're going to start to die at that point. And they did. They eventually died. It took a long time because their bodies were so perfect to start with. But eventually, they died. But you know, their relationship with God was broken right off the bat. That evening when God came down to talk with them and visit with them the way he always did, they hid. They'd never had to hide before. But now they hid. They knew good and evil. And because they'd done evil, because they had done what God didn't want them to do, they hid. And you know, that's what the Bible calls sin. Doing what God doesn't want us to do is sin. Going against what God says is sin. And sin is a really little word. S-I-N. But it's a really big thing. It broke that relationship between God and human beings. So Adam and Eve hid. So God said, hey, where are you? He knew where they were, remember? He knows everything. But what he wanted was them to come and say, God, I did what you said was wrong. I'm sorry. He wanted them to confess their sin and say they were sorry. So he said to Adam, you know, you're hiding, you're doing these things. Did you eat from that tree? And Adam said, she did it, she told me, she made me. Have you ever done that? With your brothers or friends or something? You get in trouble and you blame the other person because they did it first or whatever? Yeah, Adam and Eve did it back in the Garden of Eden. So he went to Eve and said, Eve, did you eat from that tree? Wanting Eve to come and say, I'm sorry, yes I did. And you know what she said? The snake made me, the snake tricked me. So God did what was right, what was just. He said, you can't live in my beautiful garden anymore. You can't live in this perfect place because you're not perfect. And he sent them out of the garden. He also said there's consequences for what you've done. You're now going to have pain. You're now going to work, not just the nice work, you're going to have hard work. You're going to sweat when you work because there's going to be thorns, there's going to be thistles, your gardening is going to be hard. Life is going to be hard now as a result of what you've done. Now, God is always just. He always makes the right decision, but he's also loving. He could have said, you're gone right now. He could have destroyed the whole world right now. He didn't. He said, I still love you. I still want to have a relationship with you, but it's going to be different now. Do you guys ever do what's wrong? Have you ever done something that you knew was wrong, but you did it anyway? That's sin. But because God is so loving, he made a way for us to get that relationship with him back together again through Jesus. And we're going to talk more about that later on. But if you want to learn more sooner, just contact Pastor Rod. You can give him a phone call, send him an email. And he can talk to you about how to be right and good relationship with God again, right relationship with God again. And if you want a Bible, because you don't have one, just contact Pastor Rod as well, and we'll make sure we'll get you a Bible. So, see you next time. Bye-bye.